Can you hear me? Great. I'm usually the quietest one in the room, and I generally speak for the longest amount of time. Tonight, I won't necessarily be the loudest, but I will not speak very long. I'm here to welcome and introduce the forum for the evening, not the speakers. So I am a graduate of the Rabbinic Leadership Institute at the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, so that's known as RLI. It was a 4-year arduous and difficult learning engagement, but it was some of the most wonderful years of my life, and it's given me alumni status and the ability to go back and feel part of something really exceptional. And I feel it not only when I go back to Jerusalem once a year, I feel it in the camaraderie we have with colleagues. You feel it in the closeness you have when Rabbi Pankin has just passed away and some of your best friends were his best friend, and you feel really closely connected to the sorrow and bereavement. You feel what it's like to be part of the leadership group of the North American jury when one of your classmates, 3 of your classmates are on the executive of the Rabbinic Assembly, including Deborah Newman Kamen, who was just voted in as the president. It created a lifetime of connection for someone like me who never went to the seminary. It created a reach into other denominations and other ways of thinking that were unimaginable to me, and I specifically went to Hartman to re-engage my thinking and open my mind, and I was just grateful that I had the privilege of studying with Rabbi David Hartman, along with Daniel and many others. One of the nicest things for me tonight is that I'm not introducing a speaker, but actually I'm just going to pay tribute to Rani and Dani, who were both my teachers at Hartman. I still remember the Torah that Dani taught us. It was an Agnon story, which was marvelous. Honestly, I wish I could spend my whole summers just sitting in those moments with poetry, Talmudics, great ideas, and I remember just literally being carried away by your teaching. It was just extraordinary. For those of you who have heard me talk about my travels to Israel, you've probably heard me mention Friday night service on the beach in Tel Aviv, and Rani is one of the leaders of Beit. You changed your name. It's no longer Beit Israeli. What is it? No, but your Facebook page name changed. I know these things. I know. I got it. You were hacked. You're hacked. So there are memories of going to Tel Aviv on Friday night and seeing the sunset while singing Kabbalat Shabbat in an almost too traditional to imagine style, with the least traditional of people, with the least traditional of venues, but yet there's something just extraordinary about hearing the call that Rabbi Nachman had to the world to focus on the greatness of humanity and the capacity for change. I will never forget, and if you're ever there, Tel Aviv, Friday night, 6 p.m.? 6 p.m. Give yourself an hour. It's one of the most inspirational things you will ever attend. It's in the summer. In the winter, there's actual Beit Tfilah, and I hope you're coming and touring soon. Hopefully we'll see the Chevra. So Hartman carries not only the deep memories of Torah study and of enthusiasm for re-engagement with the Spirit, but for me it's also an opportunity for us and a rabbi like myself and a community like us to extend our reach beyond our capacity by tapping into the deep and concerted effort of scholarship that Hartman makes every day. They've actually taken the art of scholarship to a new level. They've convened a round table on a regular basis of their own people, so they can really work through issues. Some of the wars and fights in those rooms on a purely rabbinic level are legendary, as told by Yossi Klein Halevi and Daniel. But out of it comes 2 things: a desire for change for the better, and what comes out of that room is the freedom to speak your mind for what's best for the Jewish people. That is something that is lacking in our world these days. People are afraid to speak. It's even hard for us in Toronto to speak clearly and fully. A, because we're not experts, and B, we don't have the scholarship or the finesse to say it in a way that won't be misperceived. That's one of the reasons we support Hartman. Another reason, of course, is because the impact that Hartman has is too great to ignore. North America has had the benefit of having its rabbis sculpted and worked over for many years, and now we're just so grateful and delighted that Israeli rabbis are emanating from the Hartman Institute. This is a major shift. It's one of the great shifts that need to happen to curtail the power of the religious institutions in Israel, is to produce its own new and relevant thinking rabbis from within. That is one of the great changes that we're excited to see. I'm delighted that I get to represent Beth Torah congregation as the rabbi. My number of my executive are here, our president Andrew Weisberg, our treasurer Stan Friedman, members of our board, and some of our staff have been here. You've met Ellie, is in charge of food. Ellie, you're probably the most important person so far. And we're delighted to host you in a most beautiful sanctuary as you go out, or as you come in. Maybe you saw the dedication to the Hartman Beit Midrash, David Hartman's Beit Midrash, which is upstairs. It's a wonderful thing for those who studied with him to see his presence now emanating throughout North America in that way. And also I get to host you as the sponsor through the charity that I founded, and I have a vision for the possibilities of what Toronto can look like in terms of great Jewish experiences, and that is living Jewishly. So I'm grateful to my shul for allowing me to do both, but I'm delighted to be both your host and your sponsor, and meaning the Wagner family, who've made our inaugural donation, and the community here that supports this kind of vision. So on that note, it's wonderful to have you here. It's a beautiful summer evening. There's nothing better to do tonight than enjoy the sunset on the wall. You see that little time marker? It's going to keep moving up and up and up, and then it's going to flatten out, and then the sun's going to be setting. We designed it that way so we'd have a little clock of sun for Shabbat. And as that's happening, you'll be here participating in the great work of changing the Jewish people for the better. As difficult as it may be, you have some of the greatest people to do it in this room. So enjoy your evening. Thank you for being here.
So thank you so much, Rabbi, for the wonderful, warm welcome, and really to the entire Toronto Jewish community for just welcoming us and Hartman in general with such warm embrace. I'm Rabbi Sarah Mulhern. I have the great honor and privilege of being a member of the faculty of Hartman in North America and running our programs in North America for graduate students and rabbinical students, along with some many wonderful colleagues, too numerous to mention. And tonight I have the honor of bringing together a conversation on a topic that I hope will be both interesting and important. I can guarantee it's important. I hope you'll find it interesting. I want to start by just mentioning, excuse me, the microphone is like as big as my child, so. I want to start just by mentioning the date. So to check my watch, it is May the 8th, 2018. So that means that we are just 1 week removed from 70 years from May 14th, 1948. And I think we can say a lot of things about where the Jewish people was on May the 8th, 70 years ago. But one thing that we can say for sure is that they could not possibly have anticipated the incredible opportunity of looking at the Jewish world as it is today and seeing a flowering of Jewish civilization both in Eretz Israel and in North America, in the diaspora. In 1948, in the shadow of the Shoah, both of those things would have been inconceivable. And yet here we are in 2018, and we look at an Israel that is faced with many challenges, but is flowering as a seat of Jewish civilization, Jewish life, Jewish religion, Jewish political thought. And we look also at a diaspora that is flourishing in terms of Jewish thought and Jewish community and Jewish thought and Jewish religious life. And this is, I'll speak as a rabbi, a tremendous miracle and a tremendous blessing. And it's also an incredible challenge to the very concept of peoplehood. Because how can we be Am Echad? How can we be one people if we live in two different centers that are increasingly becoming two different religious civilizations? So that's the question we want to dig into tonight. I think a very crucial and important question. I want to give some examples, just to sort of like name what may be in some of your minds and hearts, what's in my mind and heart. Some examples of moments where that feeling of both blessing, but also real challenge and real pain, as it sometimes begins to feel like our two centers pull apart. So a few moments that are on my mind as we open this conversation. The challenges around the Kotel. Right? What does it mean as a North American and a diaspora Jew to see an Israeli government that first says there will be egalitarian prayer, then there won't be in the Kotel? Right? What does that mean both in terms of a growing awareness that my Judaism in the diaspora looks different than a lot of my brothers and sisters in Israel's Judaism? And what does it also mean in terms of the respect that the Israeli government may or may not have for me as a leader of diaspora Judaism? Conversion, right? Similarly, I'm a North American rabbi. If I convert someone into the Jewish people, it won't be recognized by the Rabbanut, by the Israeli religious authorities. What does it mean for peoplehood if we're literally not the same people? If actually we can't even agree between us who's in the people? I want to mention also the growing questions around how Israel should welcome, or if Israel should welcome, refugees from Africa, and what that means for me as a diaspora Jew who doesn't know when and how it's fair to ask Israel as a modern nation state to also be embodying and living and creating my Jewish values in the world. And finally, I want to mention the conflict, which I think often doesn't get mentioned in these contexts, but I think one of the key issues that is a pain point and a distancing point for many North American Jews and Israeli Jews is the growing difference in how we understand the conflict with Palestinians, the future of the occupied territories, building of settlements. And so all of these issues divide us internally in our communities, but they also are issues that we see from very different perspectives, sometimes between Israel and North America. So I don't want to open all that to start with like, oh, everything's terrible, because there's also so much inspiring and beautiful. But I really want to say that the question that we're going to try and think through and talk through tonight is, how do we build across those divides? How do we both hold up the vibrant beauty of both of our communities and also not let the two centers drift too far apart and be Am Echad, be one people? So with that, as sort of an opening framing, I want to introduce my wonderful colleagues and friends. I'll start with introducing them sort of as individuals and then say a little bit about them as a group, and then we'll hear from them because they're much more interesting than me. So I want to introduce my friend and my teacher, Orit Avnery, who is a scholar of Tanakh and the author of a fantastic book about the books of Ruth and Esther, and a teacher of Bible at both the high school and university level, and also the dean of students at Shalem College. I don't know when you sleep, Orit. And a real leader in the Israeli Jewish Orthodox feminist movement. Rani Jaeger is the leader of Beit Yisraeli, which is, if you haven't been to their prayer on the beach in Tel Aviv on Friday nights, you should go, as we've been mentioning, but it's an amazing and innovative Israeli Jewish prayer community. And he's a scholar of Zionism and Israeli culture, and a member of the Beit project, which creates incredible curriculum of Jewish content for the Israeli secular school system. So a lot of interesting things to talk about there. And last but certainly not least, Dani Segal, who is a rabbi of a mixed community of Jews who are secular and religious together, and also a founder of In Prat, which is a post and pre-army program also for young Israelis, secular and religious together, and a real leader in the field of rabbinic family and couples counseling. And so these are some of the things that make them distinct as people with very different journeys and areas of expertise. But some things that draw them all together is that they're also all scholars and teachers at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. We're very, very blessed. And they are also all graduates and leaders of our Israeli rabbinic program, which we'll speak more about through the course of the evening, but just to say very briefly, is one of the programs of the Hartman Institute that I am most proud of. And it's a place where Israelis come together across the broad spectrum of religious divide and disagreement, and across the broad spectrum of political difference, to learn Torah together in the Beit Midrash, and to dream and create together what it would be to create a rabbi for Israel. which I think is an amazing charge. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists and ask them to just share briefly their thoughts on the challenge that I laid forth of how do we build across these divides of Israel and diaspora, and also maybe to share a little personally about how your understanding of those issues is impacted by your own story and areas of work. So
Okay.
I hand you
Yes, the mega mic. Wow, it has two, one milky and one, okay. Yes. So first, thank you for hosting us and for the wonderful introduction of Rabbi Saperman. I think we can go afterward.
Yeah, we're done.
I mean, we're done. Or your expectations might be too high. I also would like to say that I feel like in a costume a little bit, because like, for this audience and moment in North America, I put on a jacket and a kippah, because usually you wouldn't catch me with a kippah, regularly when I'm not in a Kabbalat Shabbat or in a shul. So I just wanted to make sure that you won't mistake me to be Dani, okay? That we're different, all right? I want to tell you how with the question of the question of diaspora-Israel relations, how did I get to that? And I have to say here two things from two opposite directions. One is that my move into this world was a sort of a revelation when I was about 20 years ago, and I was part of a program called Gvanim that was funded then by the San Francisco Jewish Federation I was the leader of the group, but actually a student in the group. I knew nothing. We gathered people from different sectors of Israeli society, and part of the program was to travel to North America. And even though my parents had North American friends, so it wasn't something that I have never seen before, a conservative shul or something like that, I feel I didn't have the glass, the spectacles or to get what I saw. And only when I was about 30, in that travel, in that journey, I was transformed by being exposed to the way you exercise your Judaism. And for the first time, I remember myself standing in synagogues. One of them is BJ in the Upper West Side in Manhattan, that many of you probably know, and in a day school in San Francisco, and in other places around, the big continent, this big continent with all its Jewish richness. And I said, what's going on here? We all felt. I was brought to tears in some of those prayers, not because I have never been to a synagogue before and that I was, exposed to Lechadodi suddenly. No, I knew about it. But there was something in the way that you, and when I say you, it's not necessarily personally you, but you, all of that instantly made us feel that we want something like that at home. And we were even a little bit insulted as Israelis that tend to think that the whole world is revolving around us, that we don't have anything like that at home. By the way, one of the biggest presents that we got from friends here, like BJ Rabbis, was that they said, we will help you, but don't copy-paste us to Israel. You have to develop your own language. But in any case, that struck me that it wasn't from here. It was from the kishkes, from the guts, that there is so much to learn from you. And that I was personally transformed by that encounter. For me, that was a real revelation. That was not only that there are Jews in diaspora, that what you are and the way that you do is actually relevant to my personal journey. One. The second way entering to this question is when in the last summer, with the crisis, with the Wailing Wall in the Kotel, the whole thing. I'm sure here I don't have to explain much more. I was stunned how much congregants in my Bet Knesset, in my synagogue, that are the closest to you, okay, in the way that they now exercise their Judaism. 99.9% of them are secular Tel Avivians who never entered the synagogue, and now they do go. They have a synagogue which is relevant for them, which is Beit Tfilah Israeli. They simply couldn't get why are you angry. I heard and I saw that it's, intellectually, they felt that they should identify with you because they know, they heard us so many times speak about, and we have so many groups. I think someone here mentioned that Toronto, Shinshinim were in Beth. So we keep on having groups coming to Bet Filah, and we receive you as guests and always recognize the fact that you're with us, and it's so important. And at the port, in the summer, I would say half of the crowd there are people coming, visitors. You are coming. And yet, my people didn't get it. Or they got it only here, not here. Okay? Not in the kishkes, not in the guts feeling of what bothers you. Maybe it's because the kotel is not that symbolic for them as a ritualistic place personally. They didn't see the thing that bothered you, and that bothered me. And since then, I keep on thinking about how to bridge that. So I would like to open with that, not by giving answers, but by kind of reflecting and refining for me the question, which became very personal and apparent. Kind of the closest people to the North American community in Israel, and still is not angry enough, is not bothered enough. And as a leader of that community, that bothered me, and still is. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. So I have a completely different story. I'm also not Dani. We are the same.
We like you so much that we...
You're so unique. No one is like you. Because I'm a woman, okay? Only because of that. So I was born in Israel, and all my life I lived in Israel, as you can hear. I mean, you don't really thought that I'm an American, I guess. And the only people I knew from North America, where I lived in Israel, was people who decided to make Aliyah, to come to Israel. And that, of course, convinced me that Israel is the most important place in the world, and that's the only option to live in. If you want to be a real Jew, you should come to Israel. Because that's what I did. Well, I was born here, and everyone around me came to Israel to live because it's the best place to live in. And not only that I was living in Israel, the landscape that I saw from my window all my life till now was the places which I read about them in the Tanakh. Okay, so I said to myself, okay, I'm reading in the book and I'm seeing through my window and everything is combined together, and that's the only option to live like, to be in Israel. So during the years, especially when I came to Hartman and all the summer programs, and I was learning with and teaching rabbis who came from North America, and because I read over and over again the Tanakh, and I saw that there are some points in our narrative in the Tanakh, and of course in the reality to see the North American rabbis who came to Israel, were not exactly emphasized or talking only about Israel. I'll give a few examples, few very, very small examples. We all had celebrate Pesach a few weeks ago, and it's a birthday to our nation, to our people, right? So where did Israel born? Not in Israel, in Egypt, right? Israel is not our homeland. We were born in Egypt, and we will celebrate Shavuot in 2 weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks. something about that. I don't remember which day it is today, right? Yeah. So we got the Torah in the desert, not in Israel. So we got the Torah in the desert, and we were born in Egypt, and we had a lovely journey to get Israel. And until Israel became our homeland, well, it will take time, okay? We have a lot of other options to be a Jew or to be a peoplehood. And it's not, here, when I keep reading Yirmiyahu and Yechezkel, Jeremiah and Ezekiel, right? So I can see that there was one moment in our history that they were two centers to the Jewish people. One in Jerusalem, and they had a prophet, Yirmiyahu, and a king, Tzidkiyahu, and another center in Bavel, and they had a prophet, Yechezkel, and a king, Yoyachin. And it was in the same time in history. They had two centers, and by the way, they were talking with each other, and not every time it was a polite talking. Okay, so there is nothing new. That's what I want to say. It was, and that's good for me to read it, because I'm telling to myself, okay, if that's our history, so we can keep talking about it. This morning I gave a shiur about Ruth and Esther to some rabbis who came to a group. And it's, again, Ruth is a very Israeli story when we are the majority in our homeland. And Esther, it's the other side of the coin, that we are the minority in the diaspora, and we're thinking about our identity, right? So it's come back over and over again. And I'm coming to this discussion because I think that it's very fruitful, and even we must, it's not only fruitful, but we must talk with each other because we have the same challenges. Maybe we have different solutions, but we can learn from each other because we have one project, and this is the Judaism, okay? And we all live in a postmodern society, and there are a lot of difficulties and challenges to live in a postmodern society and to try to build our unique identity as Jewish. And we should talk about it and see how can we do it together. I need you for this discussion, and I think that you also need us to talk about those issues.
Toda. It's a pleasure to be here. Good evening, and thank you for your introduction. I'll just say on a personal note, I'm enjoying this trip very much. I was born in America. One of the rabbis caught me yesterday morning when we were about to speak. I was singing Ofem Pripetchok, because that's what my grandmother used to sing to me before I went to sleep. And when you said who could believe 70 years ago, so when my parents made Aliyah in 73, besides it being a crazy time, I was mentioning before, it was in the Yom Kippur War or right after. So my mother went to her grandmother, who only spoke Yiddish, and told her that she's going to Eretz Yisrael. And my great-grandmother looked at my mother and said, Lach, mein Kind. Like, I know you're pulling my leg. Nobody really goes to Eretz Yisrael. Someday we'll all get to Eretz Yisrael. And 70 years later, we have two vibrant centers. And it poses a great question. We had a few hours in Toronto this afternoon. So I went to do what I usually do when I'm in another country. I go shul shopping. And we were downtown, and I knew there were some old synagogues downtown, so I went to Kiver, I think, shul, which was closed. I'm an Israeli. I jumped over the fence, but I couldn't get into the shul. And then I went to another shul, Nariver, am I saying that right? And the door was closed, but there was a bell, so I rang the bell. Somebody answers, said, listen, my name is Dani, I'm from Israel, can I come in? And I walk in, there's nothing in the shul except somebody was having a bar mitzvah lesson. And I was very moved to see the shul, to see somebody having a bar mitzvah lesson. He was studying Parashat Kitavo. It's a haftarah that I read. I felt like, hey, we're the same. I had an opposite experience this Shabbat. I walked into shul in Manhattan. Didn't really mean to go to shul because I'm a rabbi away from his community for Shabbat. Why do I have to go to shul? This is my chance. But then I got up in the morning and I had all these, guilt, Jewish guilt. Nachon. I said, Yalla, I'm a rabbi, I should go to shul. Orit took me to shul. And I walk into shul and they're reading the wrong parsha. Now, this arrogant Israeli, you're like, ugh, they don't even know what parsha it is, right? Americans. Now, it turns out that you had 2 days of Yom Tov and Pesach, and they went into Shabbat, so we're one parsha apart. If you'd walked into Israeli shul this week, you would have said, ugh, they're reading the wrong parsha. But I felt that we're not on the same page. And I want to put that on the table. I think in many senses we're not on the same page. I have friends in Israel who don't realize the importance of this relationship. They're not against it. They can look at the Pew research and speak about assimilation, sometimes with like a scorn, or here, you see, that's what happens. It's good we're in Eretz Israel. And sometimes with indifference. And I have American friends who don't realize how important the relationship is, or having troubles with it at the moment. And I want to say just one more personal thing where it touches me, and a personal hope for this conversation this evening. I work with couples a lot. I run these seminars for couples that are about to be married and for young married couples. And we discuss conflict a lot because I think it's important. We actually study a theory that some of you might know. It's an American theory from the 80s. Harville Hendricks, it's called Imago. And some of you might have worked with it. And one of the nice things about Imago is he tells couples that are having a dispute or that are fighting, he says it's good. Sometimes it means that you're sure enough about the relationship that you allow yourself to fight. But the most important thing he says is usually when we have serious arguments, it has to do with the reason we came to this relationship in the first place. Because we sometimes choose someone that touches on issues that are important to us but that are not complete, that we're struggling with, that we want as part of our life but we never could really obtain them. And then we find someone who has them, but then they're always rubbing on that point. So we're always arguing. And he says, when you're fighting, talk about it. Imago is a whole method to talk about when we have conflict. And don't put conflict aside. That's what we do sometimes. If we can watch a movie, we can go to sleep, we can hold hands, we can do anything. He says, don't do that. You can do that, but later on discuss the conflict. So I think in many ways that's what we're here for, and hopefully to benefit from that conversation.
So I want to mention that at the registration desk and also circulating around the room, there are cards for questions. So please note down your questions. My colleague Barbara will be circulating around and bringing them up to me, and that way hopefully we can get as many people their questions into the conversation as possible. So I want to open up, Rani, by asking you a question about whether this is a new problem. I think we have a sense, we mentioned a number of things in the headlines that something is changing or shifting, but I wonder whether this is new or in some ways fundamental to the whole project of Israel and Zionism, or maybe another way of saying that is, has something gone off the rails, or should we have been able to expect this from the very beginning?
Well, I think there has been a change, but in the early days of Israel, negation of diaspora I would say, was an essential move. Because how would you make that revolution of this crazy move, taking people to a land that was, 2,000 years in dreams and in Lashana Ba B'Yerushalayim, and turn it into an actual political establishment and presence. And so negation of diaspora, I would say, in a sense, is the core of Zionism. But from day one, there was a tension there, because you wanted to negate diaspora, but you wanted to love the Jews. You can't understand Zionism without an understanding that we are part of the Jewish world. If you're not thinking of that in those terms, then why are you crazy enough to go to this country? I really would like to quote my beloved, very influential teacher, Rabbi Professor David Hartman, Zichro Livracha, who used to describe the pioneers as those youngsters who came up to their parents, and as youngsters, I'm now facing it myself, they came to their parents and they said, well, everything that you are, we despise. You're from the shtetl, you're passive, you are either bourgeois, and you look strange. We would like to be different. We would like to be muscular, we would like to be socialist, we would like to be secular, and everything that you do, everything you can do, I can do better, but everything you do, I want to be the opposite. And then, David said, they slammed the door and stayed in the living room. They forgot to leave. Because if you really want to leave your parents, why would you go to Eretz Israel? Go to Australia, go to the coffee shops in Amsterdam. Why would you find yourself in the living room of the Jewish people, which is the land of Israel? And for me, that explanation of David was fantastic, because it described the inner tension of Zionism, that on one hand was a revolutionary move, and on the other hand wanted to continue and to speak for the Jewish people. Now, in the course of the years, what have changed is, I think that this is what we described, as Dani said. I don't think there is much ideological negation of diaspora anymore with young Israelis. There is simply an amazing achievement called the State of Israel, with full culture and Hebrew and economics, and the economy and Iran, and all the issues. We are in the turmoil of that. And that simply fills your world totally. And you really have to work hard to keep in the mind of Israelis that we have brothers and sisters somewhere out of this very full universe called the State of Israel. So it's not ideological anymore. I would say it's more the success of the project is a flaw in the terms of our relationship. And I think the big question is, how do we don't lose the attachment of Israelis to Israel and still have us nourish this relationship, which is crucial for Israelis. I think it's crucial for this project. And hopefully you feel it's crucial for you, I can't say. But from my perspective, we won't be better off without diaspora. We need that relationship in very deep senses. But the question that how do you keep that alive? And it's also a matter of pure history. When my grandfather came to Israel, his brother came, or one of his cousins went to the United States. So in the first generation, there was a very simple family tie. And with time, fourth cousins, who keeps here contact with his fourth cousin? It's very rare. So unless you work on this relationship, it won't last. I would say it's natural also. And in a way, we're working against it in a good sense.
Orit, you said something that I thought was interesting in your opening, that we have all these differences, but we're all working on the project of Judaism together. And there's part of me that really resonates with that, and part of me that wants to push you and ask, is that true? Is it true that we're working on the same Judaisms? Or is North American Judaism and Israeli Judaism difference. And if we do have sort of different visions of what Torah is and what Judaism is, how do we continue to build through that?
Thanks. Thank you. Great question. Maybe I'll open with a story. As you said, Sarah, I'm the dean of the student in Shalem College. And I had last year a very, very close student who studied Tanakh with me. I gave a course on Tanakh, and she studied, and she was great student. She learned, and she participated, and she was great. And she wrote a fantastic paper. And in the end of the semester, she came to me, and she said, Orit, I want to talk with you privately. Privately? So I said, okay, come to my room and we can talk. And she came and she said, I want to tell you that I'm not really Jew. I mean, by the halachic definitions. Because she came to Israel from the former Soviet Union when she was very, very young. Her father is a Jew, her mother not. And she never converted. And she said, I don't want to convert because I feel Jew. I live in Israel. I speak Hebrew. I was in the army. And that's enough for me. And I feel that this is my tradition. I like Tanakh. I want to continue study Tanakh, of course, and Talmud, everything. This is my culture. This is my tradition. This is my people. Okay. And then she told me, and I met a very nice person, a boy, and we live together. He's Israeli, and we will never get married through the Rabbanut, of course, because I can't marry through the Rabbanut because I'm not Jewish in the Rabbanut. So we just live together, and we were talking during the year, and okay, and 3 weeks ago. She had a baby boy. That I will say she had a baby boy. Mm-hmm. Okay, she has a baby and it's a boy, and she was pregnant. Okay, and so she disappeared for 3 weeks, of course. And a few days ago, she came to my office with this little boy, very sweet, and I asked, how is she? And I told her, of course, you can rest, you should rest, don't try to push yourself, and don't come when you don't have to. It's okay, I was very supporting. And I asked her what the name of the boy, and she said Nadav, very Israeli name, Nadav. And she said, you know, we in the hospital they asked us, and of course we said the truth, that his father is a Jew and his mother is not a Jew, and it's okay for me. And not only that, I asked her, did you make a brit to Nadav? It interested me, and she told me, no, we didn't do it. I don't believe in this procedure. So I didn't do it, and it's okay. He is a Jew because he lives in Israel. He will talk Hebrew. He will go to the army. He will meet someone and will get married, and that's okay for me. That's enough for me to be a Jew like this. So we had a conversation, and I want to say that the question of definitions and who will decide who is a Jew and what is to be a Jew. Because I think that we all want that it won't be a thin layer, that why am I a Jew? Maybe because I have Jewish blood, because it's genetic. Maybe it's not enough that it's genetic. We want your life to be Jewish. Maybe I'm coming to Beit Knesset every Shabbat, that's enough. Maybe I read Tanakh. Maybe I will marry a Jewish woman or a Jewish man. It's a big question that even in Israel we are facing with. And I think that Israel, as a Jewish state, enable us to answer many answers to this question. Maybe those answers cannot be good answers to you. Maybe your answers cannot be good answers for us. But maybe yes. And I think that the big project is to talk about definitions. That will be the smallest מכנה משותף. Common denominator.
Common denominator.
Thank you, Dani. That will be the smallest one, okay? Because if I'll try to make it bigger and to say what is to be a Jew, maybe we won't be able to talk anymore. But if we want to talk, let's say that we have to talk about definitions and about being a Jew. What is it? What is it? It's a biological definition, it's a social definition, it's ideological definitions. So yes, I want to talk with you about it. I think that we have a big challenge. I don't know what to do with all those questions in my country, in Israel. I have a feeling that you also do not have all answers about those questions. And maybe it will be good for us to talk about it and to think together about those questions.
So I'm going to ask Barbara to start circulating. Hopefully we can get some questions from the kahal, from the crowd here. In the meantime, we're going to ask Dani a question about Natalie Portman, because we're very intellectual and classy at the Hartman Institute. As you may have heard, she recently turned down the opportunity to receive the Genesis Prize, and it was very controversial among North American Jews. Some were sympathetic with the idea of criticizing the Netanyahu government and with protest. Some were very concerned that she had turned her back on Israel or that it was a boycott. And without getting into the specifics of whether you think what she did was right or what she did was wrong, I think it's an interesting case of the question of whether North American Jews are allowed to criticize Israel. And if there are some times when we're allowed, then how do we figure out how to give the best kind of criticism, to talk about marital counseling, right? Criticism that can be heard. So first, can we? And if so, how?
Thank you. Maybe I'll just answer the identity question.
No, I asked this one to you. Sorry.
Why, did I answer wrong?
No, that was great. I'll put it this way. Seriously, I think as long as we're criticizing, then we're in a good situation. I think criticism is good. It shows that you care, and that we're still part of something which is meaningful to other people. So the first thing I want to say is I'm all for criticism. I think it's important. And I think that anybody who feels part of the project can voice their opinion. I also want to say honestly that it wasn't easy for me what Natalie Portman did. I was actually kind of upset. We're very close. We talk a few times a week. No, just kidding. But I'll put it, I think she was wrong. And I want to say it in two ways, okay? First of all, I'll give a personal opinion. I personally think she was wrong even in the content of her criticism. I'm putting it out. It's something we can discuss. I think we have our problems, and but I think democratically, as a democratic state, we're trying to do a lot in the situation in which we are. Even, by the way, with criticism. I have a member of Knesset, our member of Knesset, her name is Hanin Zouabi. She can get up in Knesset and call on Hamas supporters to come to the border and get money from my taxes, and I'm proud of that. I don't agree with any word she's saying. I'm proud of the democracy that we are, that she can get up in Knesset and say that. But even if I want to say to Natalie Portman that, let's say she's right. By the way, I admire many things she did. I think she's a very deep thinker. I think she relates to the question of Israel in many deep and meaningful ways, also in her movies that she's created. But I think I would want to say to her, there's ways to criticize. None of us like criticism. We all react like, don't say anything bad about me. No, it's you. And if somebody puts his hand around your shoulder and says, hey, you can do better than that, you're willing to listen. And I think saying I'm not going to come, or any kind of form of boycott, is something which I have a difficulty with. I'm a son of a conservative rabbi. My Abba was always the side being boycotted. Can't do marriages in Israel. Nobody would come to our shul. Not going to sit on a panel if there's a conservative rabbi on the panel. It's a language I grew up not to like. And there's very few people or ideas that I would say, no, I'm not coming, or I don't want to talk to. So I think in many senses it's gone too far. I do want to say that as important as criticism is, another thing that I would love us to be able to do is to be very knowledgeable. Like I hear Israelis that are critical about assimilation, and say, oh, the Americans or the Canadians or the North Americans are this way and that way. And I want to say to them, you have any idea what it is to be a North American Jew? You have any idea how much family invests in Jewish education? How important it is to them? How not trivial it is to lead a rich and meaningful Jewish life? If you've studied all that, if you know enough about that, then you can say something about assimilation. But if you don't say anything. Or at least say it with a question mark. And sometimes I want to say that to criticism being pointed from this side of the ocean towards us. But coming back to my final point, I think it's important. And the criticism that I want to reach, and maybe I'll stop now, but is one that will lead us to deeper questions of our beliefs. What are we afraid of when we're criticizing? What do we really want to say? Why is Israel's behavior offending her? What is she trying to protect here? And how are we not fulfilling that? Why Israelis have a problem with that criticism? Because what is she not seeing? That's the next step of it, I think, should be on the table as part of the discussion.
Okay, so has anyone given Barbara a card? Okay, do you just not like the cards? Is that the deal? Do people have questions that if I let you have the microphone you'd want to ask? That's what I thought. All right, let's do it that way. I'm going to give my speech that I always give when I'm moderating. I believe in questions that are actually questions. That means they're less than one sentence and they end with a question mark.
Do you think that Israel's current economic standing has something to do with the rift that we're seeing now with diaspora? In other words, Israel doesn't need diaspora money quite the way it used to, and that hasn't been addressed. I just don't know if that is part of the conversation.
Let's take a couple questions and then we'll get some responses.
Just wondering if there are some parallels between Israel-diaspora relations generally and I guess within Israel, some of the tensions and just with different ways of thinking religiously, from secular to something in between to Haredi.
What is the role of secular Judaism in Israel?
That was a question. Great. Okay. Does anyone want to grab the question about money and how that impacts our relationship?
I don't want to answer the question exactly, but I do want to say something about the new relationship that I think that we should established. As you heard, I think that we believe that we have a symbiotic relationship between Israel and the diaspora. And I think that we should stop thinking about our relationship as child and parents. Okay, it can be that Israel is the child and you are the parent to support us, or the opposite, that you are the child and we, the Israeli, must come and help you to find your Judaism and etc., and all your problems. I think that we should talk about making relationship between two adults. We are in Israel adults. We have a strong country and a successful country, and you are adult. You have your life and your needs, and you know what you want. And that's how we can talk about money, I think. I mean, I'm not from the government, of course, but we can talk about money, but as two adults from the same family that asking the question, okay, we have money. Where do we want to put this money? And who should give to whom money and when? Because sometimes I think that the Israeli state gives some money to North America even. When Israel, well, I have some examples, but it's not so good examples. But I think that it's not about who gives to whom money and if we need the money and how it's reflect and makes our relationship, but to talk like two adults about our sources and to ask, is it our sources? Maybe it's our sources, and you should find your sources. So, two adults talking about money. It's not easy, but we should talk like this. Maybe you want to add something?
I always like to talk about money. No, I think it's interesting. In one sense, I could say that I would say, I don't mean to offend, that people would say it's not substantial. That Israel's Ministry of Education, its budget is billions, and we're talking about millions of dollars. And in that sense, many Israelis will say, we're fine. We can do without it. The thing is, I want to say why it is so substantial. In two ways. First of all, I think it's a connection. And just like the Kotel issue, there's many places to daven in Israel. But people felt, and I think they rightfully felt, that the Kotel is a symbol. And if somebody says, you don't have a home at home, that's what they're saying. It's not a place to pray. And I think the financial participation of Jews around the world in what's going on in Israel is substantial twice. One, it's a very, very strong feeling of connection, and the people believe in what we're doing. I also think that specifically a lot of North American money goes to what, unfortunately, I think a lot of government money doesn't go at the moment, and that's Jewish pluralism in Israel. And so much money goes into Jewish learning, but sometimes it's very narrow. And if part of Jewish pluralism is not only realizing that there's different Jewish voices around the table in Israel, but that there's more voices around that table and they belong to Jews abroad, I think that's a very worthy cause of investing in. And I think there, in that situation, money coming in from North America is very, very important to that voice in Israel. So specifically to your question, yeah, I think some people in Israel are saying we don't need this. I'm amongst those that care about the relationship, therefore they say, of course we need it. Not just for the dollars, for everything they represent.
Rani, I want to ask you to speak a little about the question of what does it mean to be secular in the context of Israel, and maybe to personalize a little and talk specifically about what you've said to me, that you would think of yourself or will call yourself a secular rabbi. What does it mean to be a rabbi Chiloni, and what's that say about secular Israeli culture?
First, I would say that, take off my kippah. Thank you. Yeah, let's go for it. That's a rebellion. I think there is something in this rebellion which is extremely important, and that is the unwillingness to get a religious establishment as controlling what is right and what is wrong religiously. I would say, answering your questions, that for me, one of the worst answers now in Israel would be that the role of the seculars is to preserve democracy, and the role of the religious is to preserve Judaism. You know, in this combination of Israel as a Jewish democratic state, this is the role. They, okay, now pointing on my friends, will keep Judaism, and our job will be to keep democracy. I think if we go in that direction, we fail. It's the duty of seculars to claim our Judaism and to exercise and to develop all kinds of forms of ways to be secular Jews in Israel in all kinds of levels. And certainly saying secular does not mean atheist. Okay? At the same time, I think, I'm sure both Dani and Orit will agree with me, that it's important in the same way that the religious sector of Israel, especially the modern Orthodox, would care for orthodoxy as much as we would like the seculars to care for our Judaism. Yeah, did I went wrong? That you will care for democracy as much as, as a vision, as much as secular Israeli Jews will care for our Judaism. And will stand in front of the establishment that prevent us to exercise our life as we like, not from the point of not from the standpoint that they are the Jews and we are the non-Jews, we are the empty wagon, this metaphor, but to claim that our position as Jews is valuable and meaningful and full, and that's why we claim and we demand that we will have full authority to celebrate as we like, to educate our kid as we like, to officiate marriage as we like. So if you ask me what's the role of secular Israelis, that's what it is.
You have some more questions?
Can I put on my...
The Pew report, PEW report, indicates that the Haredi percentage of the population is today around 10%. Demographic projections show that over a period of several decades, it will be closer to 40%. Currently, 10% controls the government because you need them for your support. Does that worry you? In other words, does it worry you in trying to say what you're just saying, seeing that the population will shift that much over the years?
Thank you. Can you tell us about some type of people or some organizations that are trying to bridge that gap between the secular and the religious? I've read about Rav Stav and Sohar. Are those type of movements going to be helpful?
Thank you. Great.
I want to relate to the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi question for a second, just to give an example of how I think conversations should be carried out. I think we're not in having the right conversation with the ultra-Orthodox community. I think if we don't have just a conflict, but if we ask, what are you afraid of? I think a lot of Haredim are afraid that we want to wipe out a lot of what they believe in. I think a lot of Chilonim and other people who aren't Charedim are afraid of them overcoming us and taking over. And I think in many senses they're wrong, and I think in many senses we're wrong. I think if we have that kind of discussion, the way I would like to have with diaspora Jews, what are we afraid of? I think Israel has, and I'll do a short promotion now for a book of a friend. I'll get back to the ultra-Orthodox in a second. Micha Goodman, who many of you know from Hartman, just put out a book called, he put it out in Hebrew called Catch 67. It's being translated into English now. It's about the conflict with the Palestinians. He opens up in the same way. He says, why can't we talk to the Palestinians? Because we don't understand what's bothering them, and they don't understand what's bothering us. They have a big question of humiliation as part of the great Arab nation, and a conflict that they actually have with Christianity in Europe. And we have a question of fear. We're not recognizing their humiliation, they're not recognizing our fear. That's a problem. I think with the ultra-Orthodox we have some of the same problem. Why am I saying this? Because the numbers and the statistics that you bring are true. And it's a growing population. Not only is it growing, it's also shifting. And while growing, it's taking much more responsibility. And it's changing. When you become from 10% to 40%, you don't have the same mindset as when you were 10%. And with the numbers, you have more sense of responsibility and more openness. Those aren't my hopes. Those are facts. It's happening. You see them more present and taking action in many things in the state that they didn't do, and taking responsibility. So in certain senses it's a worry, and in certain senses it's a hope. We have to work on it to go in the right direction. But I just wanted to use what you asked as an example of where I and many of my friends can slip into the wrong kind of conversation, not recognizing where the other side is, and to try and use that as reframing a lot of the discussions that we're having.
No. One quick example for that. I think in our minds, ultra-Orthodox and dynamism are two like water and oil. That's exactly the opposite. But on the ground level, so many changes. We have never met ultra-Orthodox persons like we know today. A woman an ultra-Orthodox woman film director. Huh? And there is a woman like that. She even won one of the prizes in Cannes. A woman which makes films, she's ultra-Orthodox. I'm not saying that's the whole, everyone, okay? But the mere fact that we have such a figure is amazing. 2 months ago, one of the employees at Hartman had an ear problem, and she went to Hadassah, and she told me, Rani, I went into the room, and there was an ultra-Orthodox man sitting there. I went out. And she said, where's the doctor? And they sent her back in. And she said, Rani, I would have never believed that. I mean, what about not being alone with a woman? And this was her physician. And I'm telling you, she's a Jerusalemite since she was born. She never expected that concrete, person. So what I'm saying is it's not the whole full picture. While that is happening, we have also the extremes, within that community doing their pushbacks because they don't like that. So I think a lot of the question is how would we receive the new phenomena? How the general Israeli public will receive those who want to join us to mainstream Israeliness and not pushing them back. I have a lot of optimism about that. It's not only because I'm a romanticist and all of that. I think there are things, and also Dani is, and maybe all of us, but I think you see things on the ground level, not only statistics, but people that are different than what we have known as people living in Israel.
So I want to expand your question about the organizations and say for many North American Jews, when we think about religious pluralism in Israel, we feel hopeless, scared, worried. We see a rabbanut that is strong, that is not tolerant of pluralism. We see less and less opportunity for the forms of Judaism outside of that. And so I wonder, because I know actually that you're all three romantic and hopeful. No, I say that hopeful. I wonder what gives you hope about pluralism, and if there are particular pieces of the work that bring you hope. Two people get to be hopeful. Who wants to be hopeful?
I'm done with hope.
So maybe I'll start with my own life as a woman and modern Orthodox. A few years ago, I think that there were no, you can count them on one hand, the women who were Talmidot Chachamim in the modern Orthodox community. Because there were no scholars, okay, because there were no options to do it. And I think that in Israel, there is a big revolution with the feminist modern Orthodox women. Maybe it's the most important thing that happened in Israel in many ways. And it influenced, of course, many other things. You can see in the front the women, they do not ask for things, they just do things. And they even can talk and say, we won't ask you, we are the thing. And nothing happened. I mean, the religious community is still there, and things changed. So I think that it's giving a lot of hope to my community, to my modern Orthodox identity. I know that there's a lot of work to do, and last week I think it was a conference for religious rabbi. And there was a session about women, without women, of course. It was only for men, okay, and rabbis. And there was a whole things in Facebook about it. You know that we have Facebook now, so we can say everything and anytime. And we don't need any editor to say, no, it's not a good article, I won't publish it. So there was a whole balagan about it. And how can it be that there is a conference to the modern Orthodox community and it's only rabbis, men rabbis, not, and there is a session about women. So some of the women said, you know what, few years ago, this conference probably would have been without any sessions about women in the religious community, because it's not important. We want to talk about Torah, and Torah it's men. So men and Torah and men, that's the whole thing that we can say. So let's see the process. Let's see how good it is that now the rabbis are sitting together and they said, oh, in our communities there are women and they really exist and really present in our community, and they want things. So we have to talk about it. How should we respond to those questions that they ask us? They want to be part of the tefillah, and they want to give shiurim, and they want to learn Torah, and they want a big bat mitzvah, and to read in the Torah. That's wonderful, that it bothered them, and they want to come and to speak about it. And next year, I hope, and if it won't be next year, it will be in about 5 years, there will be another conference, and this time it will be with women also. Let's hope, okay? So I just said to the meeting that we had before that in Israel we have kolech. It's like Joffa, but in Israel it's for modern Orthodox feminist women. And last Shabbat we had the third Shabbat, the third year, that we call it Dorshot Tov. It's women that come to modern Orthodox communities and give shiurim give lectures after the tefillah and in the tefillah and afternoon to the whole community, not only for women, because women can give shiur for women, that's okay, but to give shiur to the whole community, well, that's new. So in Bet Knesset, in Shabbat, so it's happening, and we have to say thank you that it is happening, and to hope and to do things about it, and to be part of those groups and process and ideas to help them really happen.
Just one more word about hope and establishment. You mentioned Sohar, and I think many things are happening outside the establishment or the Rabbanut in Israel. Sohar just started their own kashrut project, and after years of only the chief rabbinate giving kosher certificates in Israel, you have a big group with hundreds and hundreds of rabbis and many communities behind them giving an alternative kashrut. It's something that a few years ago we couldn't dream of. And I don't want the establishment to disappear. I want it to open up. And it's opening up in many, many ways. Zohar and Beit Hillel, if you've heard of them, that have women as part of the organization and a rabbi's organization. So there's a lot of hope rising next to the establishment and also making lots of changes within the establishment itself.
I'm sorry. I wanna draw us to a close. Do we have we have a few. Okay, we'll take like 2 more questions. I can't say no to you. Just you look so passionate.
15 years hungry.
Okay, with one last round. Lightning round.
I'm afraid I'm going to upset Rabbi Mulhern. By the way, I'm going to phrase my question, but I'll try. I'm very concerned about there is a trend in Israel, I don't know how to call it in English, called Hadata, which is a trend of brainwashing the kids from elementary school with religious content to the point where I find it really upsetting. And is there anything to counter it? Anything one can do to counter it?
Oh, hi. This year is the 70th year. Thank God. 70 years that I can remember going back. At any rate, I have a big family in Israel. Okay, 2 of my sons made Aliyah. 1 became ultra-Orthodox, 10 children, Kenei Nohar, and the other one is, I guess, modern, traditional. So the one with the 10 children, they did not serve in the army. The one with the 3 children, my youngest son there, he lives north of Haifa. They all served in the army. And we need both kinds. You know, we need the ones that are very religious, and we need the ones that are, I don't know, half religious or traditional. You know, they observe Shabbat and all the holidays, and they served in the army. So I imagine that all of you sitting up there have served in the army. I think it's very possible. You all live in Israel, right? You come from Israel. Okay, so I'm wondering, you know, the embassy, the American embassy is moving to Jerusalem, and how do you feel about what will be happening? You know, the Arabs, the Palestinians are really drumming up, you know, a lot of support, and they're making a lot of trouble. And how do you feel about that happening? And and the celebration, you know, the whole country is going to be celebrating. So anyways, thank God for that. And just wondering your own experiences, you know, either in the IDF or how you feel about what's going on right now.
Okay, so I'm hoping we can get one response to the question about education and how to keep it more open. And then, Rani, we were speaking, so I wonder if maybe you can just reflect on the experience right now of being here in America and in Canada with North American Jews while there's military trouble at home, and what it sort of feels like to be both thinking about those issues and being here. Yeah? No? I exposed you.
I want to answer the Hadassah question.
Okay, so Orit, do you want to speak to the education question? Let's speak first to the education question.
Okay, the education question, you're absolutely right. All right? Let me be very blunt about it. We have to make sure that our kids are not brainwashed with super ultra-Orthodox education. Part of it is, by the way, what the Hartman Institute is doing with the Beit program that was mentioned before, because here we have to make sure that we don't throw the baby with the bath, you say, with the water. Like, I don't want to lose Judaism because someone is pushing ultra-Orthodoxy on my kids, all right? So this is exactly the challenge. On one hand, is to stand very forcefully against all those attempts by people who would educate my kids but would never let me educate their kids, okay? That's for sure. They want to preach to my kids, but I can't go into their school. And here we have to be very, very clear about limitations. One of them is one of our policies, is never let other people teach our kids. I want the teacher, and this is the Beit policy, those who will teach Judaism are the regular staff of the school. No outsourcing to all kinds of NGOs that will bring their own ideologies into the school. There is also a big issue in the IDF. I don't want to get into this because I get very angry. And they say that I'm better when I'm angry, but I don't know if that's the way to conclude the evening. But there we also have to make sure. I'm in the IDF, and we're all, and I send my kids to Tzva Hagana Israel, and I don't want soldiers to get religious preaching there. Of course, education, and of course, every religious soldier should get all the necessary services to keep their. Of course, no question about it. But as far as ideology, there should be a line, and the line should be drawn. And by the way, the chief of staff is very much aware of it. There was a big debate about it in the IDF, but we should be aware. So that's on that. I agree with you that it's an issue, but it's an issue that also should keep us very, very mindful to the fact, and this is again connected to my answer before, part of the struggle is over Judaism, right? Not to say Judaism is theirs, it's ours, and this is the path on which we would, the ideology on which we would also like to upbring our children with that mindset. Yeah.
Please. You're really angry. Okay, and it's best. Okay. So I agree with Rani, but I want to say something about it, and I want to add something. There is someone who said that the first generation of the Zionists who were secular said we wanted to make the next generation apikorsim, unbelievers, heretics. Oh, good word, heretics. Thank you. But what happened is that they became unknown anything, burim ve'amei aratzot, unknown anything. Okay, ignorant? Because there was a problem, a big problem in Israel, that some generation, children grew up without knowing anything about their Judaism, because I think that we were thinking to ourselves, because our public sphere is so Jewish, because we're talking Hebrew and we are in Israel and we are going to the army and the Jewish calendar is in the public sphere and everything. So we don't need really to learn Tanakh, Talmud, Mishnah. I mean, it's enough that we are here. And it's not enough. It's not enough to build identity. It's not enough. We need to know our past. We need to know our tradition. And we need to know, about rituals. And we can choose, of course, what we want to do and what we don't want to do. But there is a joke in Israel. There used to be a joke in Israel that secular people come to a Beit Knesset in the diaspora, and then they go, Olim la Torah, they are going to read the Torah, and the rabbi asks them, Dani Ben, and he said, Dani Ben 35, 45. And the rabbi looks on him and he said, that's not the right answer, right? But the secular guy didn't even know that he should say the name of his father or mother or whatever. It's a bad joke. It's a very, מתנשא. Yes, it's a bad joke. Which religious people talks about the secular people that they don't know anything, right? We know everything, and we are the one who really Jews, and they're not really. They just talk Hebrew, but they're not really Jewish. So I don't like this joke, and I don't like this thinking. And as a teacher in Be'eri, I am, of course, agree with Rani totally that we have to have teachers from school that will teach the tradition according to the school. Exactly like they teach English, they will teach Torah and Navi and tradition, things like this. But I want the children in Israel to know about their tradition, so they can know it and think how they can how can they even improve it for the next generation. We got a Jewishness from 2,000 years ago, and now what bothers me is what Jewishness I will give to my children and to my grandchildren. It bothers me. It cannot be the same Jewishness that I got. It cannot be, because the world is changing. And it's really very frightened, those changes in the tradition. So I want everyone to know a lot of things, but of course that I'm afraid from one way that everyone will learn the same way, and that will be the right way, and that's how you should live your life. That's very frightening me. I don't want it. I want diversity in our Jewishness in Israel, and of course here, and to learn to accept each other. We accept you, you accept us, and in Israel and in Toronto, I don't know how the relationship between the different communities in Toronto, between the secular and the modern Orthodox and the ultra-Orthodox and the conservative. Probably you have problems also about it, and we should think about it, what to do.
So I want to end with one final question for all three of our panelists. Which is to push a little on, we've said many beautiful things tonight about how important it is that we have this relationship and how much we have to learn from each other. But I want to push you to say exactly why. Exactly why. What is it that you as Israelis need to learn from us as diaspora Jews? And what is it that we as diaspora Jews need to learn from you as Israelis? Really, what is it? And what do we need to do? What is it that you as Israelis really need to do to build the relationship with the diaspora? And what is it that we as diaspora Jews really need to do? What are the sort of take-home core pieces of the big, beautiful ideas? Just a small question to end.
One sentence to each?
Yes, you start.
No, I already.
No, you start.
Dani will start.
Okay.
מצוין.
You are our leader.
Yes, two questions. What do we need to do and what can we learn? And I can't answer both in 30 seconds. I'll say,
Give you
I
a
think,
whole minute.
no, what we need to do is not give up. I got up early in the morning 2 days ago, 5 o'clock, to visit my cousin who lives in Teaneck. Took me half of the day. It was the free day I had in New York. And my wife asked, why do you waste your free day? And I said, they're mishpoche. And they're my family. And Avram Infeld used to tell this story about Chase Bank of Manhattan. They had this ad, you have a friend in the Bank of Manhattan. And when Bank Discount was trying to get Jews to come, they said, you may have a friend in the Bank of Manhattan, but we're mishpoche. And family is, so we need to be out there. We need to tell our people that these are our family. And I think we have a lot to learn from the family. I come back inspired every time by the things I was mentioning before, by the seriousness of the way people relate to their Jewish lives, by the amount of time and effort and money that people are willing to put into education, and the way education is perceived in the next generation and what we want to do for that. I'll say that one thing. If I take that back and we take it back to the community, then we've learned a lot.
Should be short. I don't know who chose this beautiful verse that you have here from Micha. יגיד לך אדם מה טוב ומה אדוני דורש ממך, כי אם עשות משפט ואהבת חסד והצנע לכת עם אלוהיך. And I think that this משפט and חסד and צניעות, ענווה, is that what we need. We need to come with anava for you, and when we come to talk with you and to say we don't understand everything. A lot of chesed and a lot of anava. And mishpat also will be there, I'm sure. And I want that when you come to talk with us, with Israel, you will come with a lot of chesed and a lot of anava, that you cannot understand exactly what happened in Israel, exactly like we cannot understand exactly what happened in Canada. And that's how we can talk, and maybe some fruitful things can come out from that. Hatznei alechet, anava v'chesed, and that's how we can hope that we will have something to give to the next generation. Maybe I'll finish with, I have 20 seconds? Half an hour?
15.
Half an hour, okay. A few years ago, the Mossad, you know the Mossad in Israel?
We were not allowed to talk about it.
We're not allowed to talk, and it's record. Okay, so I will do it very shortly, without very important details. The Mossad asked me to come and talk about Megillat Esther. Okay. And the people in the phone told me, you will see no entrance, go in, we are the law, you can do everything that we will tell you. Okay, so I came in, I can't tell you where is it, because if I'll tell you, I'll have to kill you. So I came in and I saw a great map of Iran. And they said, oh, great location for Megillat Esther. Okay, it's exactly about the same. And I asked myself, how can I talk with them about Megillat Esther? And they said, you know, Esther was a sleeping agent. Can I say a sleeping agent? And Mordechai was the man who had to awake her and tell her, you know, you're not there only to be a queen. You are an agent, a secret agent, and you have to do things. And she said, no, it's my new identity. I want to be a queen. And it was hard. you will invite me to Purim, and I'll tell you everything about Megillat Esther. I cannot do it now. So maybe that will be the last words for me, that each one of us will feel that he is or she is a secret agent of the Jewish people. And whenever we'll have to be awake and to do something to our people, we will be there, and we will do. Each one of us in the place that he or she will be. It's not the same place. We are secret agent of a very, very special people, the Jewish people. And of course, if you want to be a secret agent for the whole world, it's okay also. But to do something good and chesed to the world and to our people, that will be enough, I think.
All right, so I would like to ask you, I'm sure you are already, I know you are, but to be engaged with us and also engage in a way that would make Israel a place you would like to live in. Not in general, but be engaged with institutions and with people that are making Israel a place you would dream of if you would like your kids or yourself to live in. And the second request, and you're doing that because you're coming, is that when you're coming, be fully present. I have a friend who's a Reform rabbi from New York. And after the Kotel thing, I told her, Lori, every time you come home, we give you a sense that you're not home because you can't express your Jewishness as you are. And so I know you're coming in all sorts of groups and delegations and programs and meeting these and these and these people. I would like to ask you not only to listen to us, but to talk whenever you're there. Be present in the way that you're, in your Jewishness. Make your rabbis visible. Be visible. If you meet soldiers, why don't you tell them about your congregation? If you have a rabbi, this is our rabbi. Come not only to, when you come to Israel, be present, be visible as the Jews that you are. Not only as our supporters, which is fantastic and important and heartwarming and all the great words, but also come fully as Jews, as the Jews that you are. It's very important. I'm thinking of a soldier named Nadav, maybe, who's now in his base near the Gaza Strip, where you might be visiting as part of your tours and support delegations. When you listen to him, why don't you ask his commander for 10 minutes to tell him who you are? That I'm not saying that will change the world in a minute, but this mind shift of Israelis, of us, to recognize you and your stories and why did you come and what do you do here, that's already, I would suggest that's a big change. So thank you for having us.
Thank you so much to all three of you for teaching us and sharing of your lives and of your Torah and of your wisdom. And thank you everyone for being here, for your wonderful questions, and for joining in the conversation. And have a wonderful evening. We want to make sure we didn't fall asleep. Thank you.